welcome to this episode of the Chasing Light podcast, where photographers and cinematographers talk about their craft and life making images. Today on the Chasing Light podcast, we have the lovely Sarah Marino, an accomplished nature photographer, photography educator, and writer who splits her time between home in rural southwestern Colorado and nomadic traveling primarily across America's West and throughout North America. Sarah's teaching through speaking engagements, workshops, coaching, ebooks, and video tutorials focuses on personal expression, seeing opportunities in any landscape, finding joy in photographing nature's small scenes, and a slow, quiet style of photography focused on exploration, observation, and deeply connecting with nature. Sarah is a co-founder of the Nature First Photography Alliance and promotes the conservation and responsible stewardship of wild places through her photography and teaching. Sarah is the recipient of the North American Nature Photographers Association Trailblazer Award for her innovative contributions to the field of nature photography. After both Justin Black and Jerry Dodrill had mentioned Sarah as a photographer whose work they admired, I got the opportunity to meet and spend some time with Sarah at this year's NANPA Summit in Tucson. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to welcome Sarah Marino to the Chasing Light podcast.
Well,
Thank
thanks,
you
Ian.
for coming on the podcast, Sarah.
Yeah, it was so nice to meet you at the summit. And then I'm really looking forward to talking with you today about all things related to photography.
Yeah, the summit was great. It was my first time there. And it was great to meet you and your significant other and lots of other photographers there. So it was great. So I always ask this kind of obligatory question to every photographer that I have on here, because I want to get people to understand kind of your backstory and really, you know, how did you get started in photography? How did you get interested in it?
Well, I started out as a hiker and a backpacker. So
Wow.
that was my main interest in nature. And then I casually ended up with a camera. I'm not quite sure how, just a little point and shoot. And at the same time, I was also in graduate school full time, and I was working full time in the nonprofit sector in a ridiculously stressful job. And so I needed to add another thing to the mix. So I started photographing. And I found pretty quickly that the stress of school and the stress of work, and then I was in a marriage that wasn't going well, to be very clear, not the person I'm married to now. So it was like all of those things were coming together to create a really stressful, challenging life. And the only time I was really able to feel like I was living in the moment and was relaxed was when I was photographing. And so I started seeking out that experience more often. So I think it was just a kind of a natural extension of my interest in the natural world through hiking and backpacking. But I think the piece that kept me coming back was that it really was just a different existence than I was used to. Like being a very career-oriented, accomplishment-oriented person, that this was actually the first time in my adult life that I had actually just slowed down and kind of enjoyed what I was doing instead of always thinking about the next thing. So I kind of just pulled that thread and eventually left that other career. And now I'm doing photography full time. And my life looks so different than it did. And I sometimes see friends. I'm still good friends with 3 of the women that I was friends with during that period of my life. And like just the compare and contrast of where their lives have taken them and my life has taken me. It's just like, I'm really glad that I have this less stressful existence now. So
Yeah, it's
that's where I
amazing.
started.
It's amazing you were able to kind of jump off and do that. I've wanted to do that myself and just haven't had the chutzpah to do that. So it's amazing that you were able to go and do that and pursue kind of your passion and the things that because when I'm out photographing in nature, I feel so relaxed and kind of happy. My body, you know, everything feels just great when I'm doing it. And so hearing you say that, it's you know, that you pursued that passion. I'm a little jealous, I guess.
Well, I can give a tip. Move to a town of 900 people because
Wow.
I thought when we moved from Denver to southwestern Colorado, I fully intended to continue my career as it looked. Uh, I had a really good group of clients. I was doing consulting for foundations and nonprofit organizations, and I fully intended to continue. And then I didn't like the travel as much, and I was feeling like I really don't want to have one foot in Denver and one foot in a rural community. And so it just kind of became like I slowly pulled back on that career and then slowly moved into photography. And I think for me, that was the best way to do it. I think if I had just made a quick transition that I guess I just feel like building it up over time. And then you kind of realize, do you like this or do you not?
Yeah.
Because some people just, I think it's the business side isn't a good fit, and that kind of dipping your toe in will help you figure that out. Whereas
Yeah.
for me, I realized I like a lot of these things, and I'm good at enough of them that I can make this work.
That's fantastic. And I mean, what was the impetus for you to kind of, change careers
I
over
think it
time,
was
obviously, but
I think it was really that feeling like I was splitting myself too thin. Like I essentially had two 3/4 time jobs of where I was doing my nonprofit work as kind of like 30 hours a week, and then I was doing my photography 30 or more hours a week, depending on if we were traveling or not. And just I like the Avett Brothers, who are one of the bands we like. They have a line in one of their songs that's "Decide what to be and go be it." And I kind of felt like I just need to decide what I'm going to be. Am I a leadership and strategy consultant, or am I a nature photographer? Because I can do both, but I should just choose one and just do one and do it to the best of my ability. And
yeah.
living where we were living, it just kind of became a natural decision point of it's time to try photography full time.
And how long was that debate going on in your head for,
A couple
you
of
know?
years, like
Yeah.
the consulting was ramping down and the photography was ramping up. I also made the transition at the most awful time because I ended my biggest consulting contract in January of 2022 or 2020.
Oh,
So
wow.
I
So
said
that was
bye
right near
bye
COVID,
to.
like COVID
Oh
happened right
yeah,
at that time.
yeah, it was awful timing because it was
Hmm.
like I ended that big contract that was about half of my income. And then I had a full slate of workshops planned with some colleagues and by myself for 2020. And then by March 2020, that plan was totally out the window. And it's like I had given up this really great, reliable work that
Yeah.
I did enjoy. And then here I'm faced with canceling everything. So I actually think it turned out to be okay, though, because once I realized I accepted, okay, all this work I put into these workshops, it's just out the door. Like I just need to accept it and move on and then figure out what else I'm going to do. And then I turned much more to online education and digital products and video tutorials, ebooks, that sort of thing. And I actually think it's a better fit. So
Yeah.
I think I ended up in an okay place, even though 2020 was a pretty awful professional experience.
Yeah. I was looking through your ebooks, and I have to say they're really spectacular, the amount of work that you have put into them. And where did the idea come to, make ebooks versus just putting up prints? And so a lot of photographers just, select prints, they put them
Mhm.
up, and then they sell their prints. But these ebooks are not only, of course, showing your prints, but they're really informative.
Well, so that previous career, when I ended my career in the nonprofit world, I was working as a consultant. But before that, I had worked in organizations, and one of those organizations was a statewide nonprofit that helped other nonprofits do their work more effectively. And um, I was the director of programs there, and then I was the co-director for about a year. And during that period of time, I put out one of my major jobs was doing a lot of research and reports. So gathering data, analyzing it, and then putting out reports on the state of the nonprofit sector in Colorado. So I had the experience of gathering a lot of information, pulling the writing piece together and then publishing it as a report for the nonprofit community. So I had that experience with like publication design software and all of that. And so moving into photography, I had the skills to already put together a publication like that. And then we went to Iceland in 2012 for the first time. And at
Yeah,
the
I love
time
Iceland.
there was, yes, one of my favorite places. But when we went for that first trip, there was almost no information. We had a map and a Lonely Planet guidebook. And that was the only information we had, like the Vesterhorn, which is now like so black sand dunes with the grasses growing on them.
Yeah.
Like that's an iconic location. When we pulled up to that place in our camper van, we had never seen a photograph of it online before. We just saw it on the map, drove out there, wanted to see what it was. So that was what Iceland in 2012 was like, is there was just no information. So after a couple of trips, we decided we might as well put out a guide for photographers. So we created what we called Forever Light, the Landscape Photographer's Guide to Iceland. And that was actually our first ebook, which I think we published in 2013. So it was just the kind of pulling, this is the theme in my photography career, is just pulling the threads from what I was good at in my nonprofit career and then just translating them to photography. So that was the first ebook that we did. And then I think I have 5 or 6 paid ebooks on our website. And then we have probably about 20 free portfolio ebooks. So it's just, I feel like it's a way that I really like communicating, because I can publish it directly to my audience without a gatekeeper. So like a publishing company or anything like that. It's very low cost. Like doing the self-publishing piece is without a printed book is very low cost. And they're easy to modify over time. So you can release a new edition when you feel like you have something new to say. So it's overall it's been something I've really enjoyed in terms of sharing my thoughts and sharing my work as a photographer.
Yeah, they're really nice.
Thank
They're
you.
really,
Thank
really
you very
nice.
much.
And the writing is great. I think I bought one and I downloaded a bunch of the free, ones, which are portfolios, right? Images,
Mm-hmm.
but just, and I read through a lot of the samples that you have on there so people can get a taste of sort of what's in each one. And they're great. They're really
Well,
great.
thank you. Thank you. I
Yeah.
appreciate that feedback.
No, I think they're very helpful. Go check them out.
Yeah, a bunch of them are free.
Yeah. The one thing that I notice in your photography, which it's not all your photographs, but a lot of your photographs. And I think you can tell me if this is part of your voice, but the images have a very calming, soft, pastel feeling to them, and they're just really beautiful. And how did you develop that style and voice? For those, some people would say they might be feminine. I don't, feminine, masculine, doesn't really matter. I feel like pink or purple. Purple's my favorite color. So, but I just love the feeling. It's different. There's something different about it.
Well, I join you on Team Purple. I absolutely love the color purple. I think that origin story of when I started photography, I was living such a chaotic life, 100% by choice. It was absolutely by choice that my weeks were insane and I never had a spare moment to think, except for when I was doing photography. So I'm not like, it was the life I wanted to live at the time, but I didn't know anything different. So once I started doing photography, I think I realized there is a different way to be in the world. And that feeling of chaos, like organizing that chaos and distilling it down to some key ideas with pretty simple minimalistic compositions, I think I was resisting that the rest of my experiences as just like living. So I think because that was trying to find that feeling of calm and peace and quiet in my life was something I really loved about photography. That was what I think I started pursuing. And it's just where I started is kind of just, I continued with that. And now I think it is one of the main qualities of my portfolio. And I think because I like that feeling of the feeling of being in nature and experiencing those quiet moments is something that I really love, that I want that to show through in my photography. So I lean into the quieter light. I love the lower contrast, softer colors. Like my husband and I, and he's also a photographer, we always joke about how the sliders in Lightroom go both ways. Like you
Hmm.
don't always have to increase your saturation. You don't always have to increase your contrast. You can lower contrast. You can lower saturation. You can cool things off. Um, and I
Yeah,
think I
I
just,
see that a lot in your work, like the sliders going the opposite
yeah,
direction, and
yeah.
I think it's very unique, and it's like I said, it's very calming. There's some calming aspect.
Yeah. So if that's what I love so much about the experience of photography, I feel like I generally gravitate towards the light and the colors and the subjects that amplify those qualities. So I think the point that like the pulling the thread, that I'm just pulling those same threads from my early time in photography. I will say though, I also really like the intensity of nature too and the
Mhm.
boldness. And I feel like my black and white work is where that comes out more.
Yes,
So
for
with
sure.
my like I
And you're not
go
afraid of black,
yeah,
which I
I'm not
really
afraid of
love.
black at all. Yeah.
Which I really
I
love.
I really like that like the sometimes in nature we find the exhilarating moments and the dramatic, and I think that I like seeing the full continuum of the nature photography experience. I don't want to just highlight those most epic moments. And I think when you look a lot of portfolios, that's what people are showing you, is they're just showing you the most incredible intense moments and exhilarating moments. And I guess I want to represent a more full continuum of
Yeah.
how I experience the natural world.
Yeah, I was on a workshop with Bill Neal. He was a guest appearance, and and I've said this on every podcast now, but uh, I have a tendency to shoot the wides, and then Bill was like, "Hey, look down at your feet. There's some
Mm-hmm.
things down there, kind of thing," and try to remind myself that there's beauty in the details. Your photography is incredibly beautiful, especially your plant, I guess, botanical images, right? And they're some really special stuff, and they have a very, very graphic feel to a lot of them. Um, Kind of how did that interest develop over time?
Well, I think that the main reason that the interest developed is because I think I was yearning to learn more about nature. Like I feel like I came to nature because I appreciated the experience, but I knew very, very little about the natural world. So my background was in leadership and strategy and all these things. Like
Yeah.
I only took the most obligatory science classes in college. So once I started feeling like, okay, I've done all the things of like I'm out in nature, I've experienced those epic moments. Like there has to be something more, and I that gateway for me to learning more about the natural world was plants. So in Death Valley in particular, that's a place I spend a lot of time. I started noticing that this place that we call desolate, like a lot of people refer to a place like the Mojave Desert as lifeless or desolate. Or like I was there with a friend and she's like, this place has no trees. And my response is, well, the trees are just different. There are trees. They're just
Yeah.
different. They're smaller. And they look very different than what we're used to. But so once I started checking that impression, so the first impression of a place for me is like Death Valley is a desolate place. But then I've tried to go a little bit deeper. I have one of my portfolios is called Second Impressions because it's all about going beyond that first impression and seeing what's the next layer of impressions that you get of a place. And I feel like in the Mojave Desert in particular, once you start looking a little bit more deeply, you start
Mhm.
seeing life everywhere. So
Yeah.
whether it's things like reptiles or mammals like kit foxes and coyotes, there are birds. There's so many birds, especially if you're near some of the riparian areas or the springs in the park, in the canyons. You'll hear birds everywhere. Um, and if you start looking, also, you'll see plants everywhere. And I started having a lot of interest in those plants. Like, how do these possibly survive in such a, what we call a desolate environment? It's also extreme. Hottest, driest, lowest is the tagline for Death Valley
Mhm.
National Park. And I feel like starting to learn about those plants helped give me an entirely different appreciation for the ecosystem. And then I started repeating that in other places. So I feel like for me, the the easiest and most interesting gateway to learning more about the natural world was starting to learn more about botany and the plants that I was seeing. So as simple as just identifying what I was looking at and then learning about one or two characteristics. Uh,
Mm.
and I feel like that has greatly enriched my experience out in nature. So that's the why. I think the what is more uh, the finding order in chaos. So that's a theme throughout my work. That's something that, like, calming down my chaotic mind through nature photography. And that plays out in looking for patterns and organizing lines and shapes and textures, taking a single idea, like an interesting set of patterns and leaves, and then turning that into a photographic idea. So I think those two things come together nicely because I find it really interesting to learn about plants. And then I really like looking at them because they're beautiful. And then once you start looking more closely, you can organize them into patterns and interesting shapes and lines. And you can also play around with shallow depth of field and create
Yeah.
all sorts of abstractions and take what somebody might just walk by and turn it into something that looks beautiful. So I just really enjoy all those aspects of working with plants.
Yeah, there's some just beautiful photos that you've taken. Are you on the trail to become a professional botanist? Because you probably know so much now of, especially of a particular region, right? Like, I was going to ask, what are some of your favorite places? But I know Death Valley, right, is a place
Mhm.
you've spent a lot of time. And
Well, I think so. So to answer your question, absolutely not. I will never be able to become a botanist. I've been working on a native plant master certification here in
Ooh,
Colorado, which is you have to take 3 courses, 3 multi-day courses in 3 different ecosystems, and I finished 2 of them, and I'm not going to be able to finish the certification this year, but I'm I will finish hopefully at some point. And being around professional botanists that are teaching these classes, or like one has a PhD horticulturalist, and then there was a master's level botanist for the field and or Fish and Wildlife Service, and then like a range ecologist for the Forest Service. It's like these people are really impressive, and their knowledge is
yeah,
like so incredibly deep. I never see myself going that deep at all. I think
yeah,
it's just more, I want to be able to know what I'm looking at, and I want to be able to share that with the people that I'm teaching with photography. And then that's pretty much where, like,
where it
my,
ends.
yeah, where it is. Exactly.
Yeah. And all right, so what are some of your favorite places? I mean, obviously, like I said, Death Valley is definitely one of them,
Hmm.
right? Are there
So,
others that you
well,
love?
I'll answer your question in kind of um, in one way, and then I'll actually answer your question. So I think my first answer is I pretty much love every place I visit. Like,
Yeah.
that if it's a natural place, even if it's just like a little nature preserve in some random town we end up in, I find something that I'm interested in and find something to appreciate. So I pretty much feel like my favorite places are the places I've been to most recently because they're fresh in my mind. And I just love every natural or wild place that I visit. So that's generally how I approach the natural world. Is I can be happy anywhere. I can find photographs pretty much anywhere.
Yeah.
If I had to narrow it down to a couple key places, it would be for sure Death Valley. Just, I, the more I explore that place, the more I realize how much there is left to explore. We've hiked
Yeah.
to like 80 some canyons in the park, and it feels like
Wow.
we barely scratched the surface.
I mean, the
And it's
last time you
also
were there, right? You spend like six weeks there or something like that?
7.
7. Wow.
So
Yeah.
yeah, we have an RV and we are able to camp there in the winter.
Yeah.
So in the vicinity, not just in Death Valley, because you're only allowed to camp in the park for 30 days. But
Oh, wow.
so generally, Death Valley would be one of those places, and then some other favorite places that I've revisited quite a few times in North America would be Mount Rainier National Park, Olympic National Park. So very different, obviously, than Death Valley.
Hmm.
I love the Smoky Mountains.
Oh, wow.
I really love Acadia National Park, which really surprised me because I went to Acadia first for work, like a photography conference, and was just there thinking this is a really busy place. The last time I was at Bar Harbor, it felt like just like a crazy, like too many people. And then once we got a little further onto some of the trails in the park, it's just it was a small scene paradise. So particularly
I haven't
love.
been there. I have to check that out.
Yeah, it's really, really lovely. You get the mix of the coast, the very wild coast, and then mountains, like interesting coastal mountains. So you get interesting weather. There are little microclimates everywhere. So even if you hike a couple of miles on a trail, you go through different microclimates. It's just Acadia is a really fantastic place. And then like the classics like Yellowstone and Grand Tetons. Um, so again, pretty much every place I
Yeah.
just love.
All right. So go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I was going to put you on the spot now. And then if you had one place to go that you haven't been to,
that I haven't been
where
to.
would it be? But
well, international or North America?
Anywhere in the world. Anywhere in the world.
Well, we're hopefully going to New Zealand this year. So that would be the
Nice.
obvious answer because I have a trip planned there. I really would like to explore Patagonia, mostly not for the mountains so much, but for the plants and the trees. So those would probably be the top
Yeah.
two.
New Zealand's beautiful. I spent a month there. I spent like 3 weeks on the South Island and 1 week on the North Island. Fun place.
Yeah.
Just beautiful everywhere.
So what would be your one place? Like if you
Oh God. Well, I'm going in October. I'm going to Africa with my uncle, and he's been multiple times, and he goes like 2 or 3 times a year for the last like 10 or 15 years. So I'm looking forward to doing that and photographing animals and the scenery there and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So that would definitely be one. Patagonia is another one for me too. I have not been down there, so yeah, I would like to go there as well.
The problem with Patagonia, it seems like it's the wind. Like the weather sounds very challenging. And for the types of things I'm interested in photographing, which are like the little things that move around on the ground,
right. Right.
I'm guessing that it would be a kind of challenging photographic experience, but it also, of course, just looks like one of those world-class landscape photography destinations.
Yeah, it's I've talked to Justin who runs workshops, down there, and he's got a couple different kinds of workshops that he does there. Some are based on
the pumas,
finding
right?
the pumas, yeah, and some are just like the mountains and scenery and that type of thing. But yeah, I would really love to go down there and check that out at some point. New Zealand, how long are you going for?
Our plan is a month. Our plan is to work the first 2 weeks and then do 2 weeks of vacation.
Are you going to rent a van and
yeah, that's the plan.
Yeah.
Rent a van. No plans. So that's how we generally like to approach our travel. And that's one of the benefits of going to places in the shoulder season. Like when we went to Alaska, we rented a small motorhome. Our last couple trips to Iceland, we've been in a camper van, and it's like you don't have a single reservation. Linger where we want to linger, move on when we want to move on. So that's the plan for New Zealand too.
It's a amazing place. I would definitely suggest going to Aspiring National Park if you haven't heard of it, or you can take a private jet boat. They'll take you for the day up into there, and then you can get in some canoes and canoe around. They have some amazing places in that area, and it's like untouched world from like the prehistoric age. They have huge giant ferns and all these amazing things in there that are really spectacular. I love that area. I wish I could have gone back and spent a lot of time in there, but
well, I will definitely make note of that.
Yeah, it's a fun place. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit. So how do you balance kind of the creative aspects of photography versus, the need to make a living and the business aspects of of running, a photography business and needing to make a living doing that. It's always a
Yeah,
challenge, right? Tell people how you do that.
it is a challenge. So I think there would be two things I would mention. And I think the first is that I left a career that I loved to do this. And so I want to do this in a way that makes the most sense for me. I could go back to that other career. I made the choice to do this, and I don't want to feel like I have to do a bunch of things that I don't like doing or that are out of my comfort zone constantly. So I think the first decision was I really want to do this on my terms. And then the second point is like the business skills are, you have to learn the business skills. And I was lucky because that was part of my previous career. So I think I was able to come in with the skills to do a lot of the things I really enjoy doing without having a huge ramp up time. Because I think that's something that I see with a lot of other photographers really struggling, is that they think that they're going to spend a lot more time photographing than they do.
Yeah.
And they don't necessarily come in with an understanding of things like how to organize a mailing list, how to put together a newsletter, how to communicate both in writing and now video. Like those are things that I think a lot of people come into photography thinking like that the photography will dominate more than it does. So I came in with the background in helping nonprofit organizations be effective. So even though they're making money to accomplish a mission, it's still business skills. And so I came in with those skills, and I didn't have to ramp up in the same way that a lot of other photographers do. And then I also made the decision that I'm going to focus on the things I most enjoy. And I feel like the fact that I enjoy the business side of things for the most part, and I decided to focus on the things I enjoy most, it really doesn't feel like that much of a compromise for me.
No.
I think one of the decisions I did make is I don't want to have a crazy busy workshop schedule. So I teach when opportunities to teach workshops come up or to speak at conferences come up, I often say yes, but I also have a really flexible schedule so that I don't have a workshop schedule of like one a month or 10 to 12 a year or something like that, so that I have the time to really work on the things that I enjoy most. And that's going to be the writing and the teaching in a more controlled environment. So I don't enjoy the workshops as much. I don't enjoy them to the point where I want to do one once a month for the rest of my
Gotcha.
life. I like doing a few select workshops with people who appreciate my style of teaching a couple times a year. And then I enjoy spending the rest of my time writing and teaching in other ways. So for me, it's finding the things that plug in to my interests and my skill set the best, and not feeling like I'm doing a bunch of things that I don't enjoy day to day. So for me, that's a compromise on the money side, because if I taught workshops, if I taught 12 workshops a year, I could do very, very well financially. But I would rather have this feel like a sustainable career than really try to push it on the income side of things. So I think for me that it's some compromise. It's figuring out what I'm good at and figuring out how I can align the business things with where I feel I get the most creative inspiration and fulfillment.
And what would you say your teaching style is that is different?
Well, so how can I answer that question in a way that's not offensive? um, so I have taught a few workshops where I feel like some people who go on workshops, they treat workshop leaders who are expert photographers kind of as hired staff or service workers. And I want to be seen as an expert in my field, and that you're there to learn from me, and that I'm not just there to bring people to the best locations and get the best photos. So teaching a few of those workshops where I felt like I was being treated much more as like in a very transactional way, that I did not find fulfilling at all. I found that to be a grind. I'd rather go back to my nonprofit work than like just take people who don't have who kind of are resisting even what I'm trying to teach, versus working with people who are attracted to my style of photography and want to learn directly from me. Because my approach to photography is we're going to show up at a place. We're not going to know what we're going to photograph. We're going to respond to conditions. If the light sucks or the light is bad, we're still going to photograph and we're going to enjoy it. We're going to be open-minded about light. We're not going to bring a lot of expectations. We're going to focus on both the big stuff and the small stuff. And for kind of a generalized workshop student, that's not necessarily what they're looking for. They're looking for a tour guide to take them to the best locations and help them set up a composition that they very possibly had in mind in advance. So that's a perfectly valid way to travel. And I think a lot of workshop instructors really enjoy working with that kind of scenario. I just don't. I don't enjoy that at all.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, it depends on what the individuals are looking for in the workshop. Me personally, I kind of use the work. I said this to Justin. I kind of use the workshop as a scouting location, so I know sort of, if I've never been to an area before, I'm getting a really quick, 5-day kind of, here are some locations, at this place. Here are some times of the year where it's great to come. And then, of course, in his case, they do a lot of midday in studio, going through post-processing and whatnot. Whereas, I heard you say in some other thing, you'd rather be out shooting in the midday, and it doesn't matter what that light is, right? Just getting out and understanding, okay, this light is different. What am I going to get now? Like, what is Earth giving me, right? What is, to look at right at the moment. And I think that's great because I like to photograph all different times of the day personally. So.
Well, I think it's like you said, it's what people are looking for. And I think like a more tour-oriented workshop experience, if you're a person who has maybe a 1 to 2 weeks of vacation a year that you can use for photography, and you want to, and what brings you the most joy is photographing really impressive landscapes under great light. And you don't really care who's taking you there. You just want somebody who knows the place as well. I feel like that's a totally valid way to approach photography. But I personally don't want to spend my days doing that. And it's just a totally different personality. I know friends who lead workshops for workshop companies that have that approach, and they love it. They absolutely love it. Because I think there is more pressure when you say like this is a creative retreat. Like there's a different kind of pressure. Because if you tell people that they're going to leave the workshop having some deeper insights into their motivations and maybe building their confidence and working on a different set of skills, like that's a different type of pressure than just trying to get people to the best locations. So it's some people I think are better, like they're better at knowing workshop leaders. They know more about weather than I do. They have better intuitions for grand compositions than I might. So if your skill sets are oriented in that direction, then that type of workshop business might be really fulfilling. My interests are different, and I think attract a smaller group of people. Like that, there aren't as many people just interested in photographing. Like you said, what Bill told you, like what's at your feet. It's just a smaller clientele. So I don't even know if I'd be able to support a 12 workshop a year schedule. So just figuring out what.
I think it is important what's at your feet and around you. And I mean, all of those things, because like, everybody's capturing a giant landscape scenery. And I think it is important for people to understand that there is more than just that. And I think you do that in your photography. So I think that's great that that's your focus and that's what you want people to understand if you're going to do a workshop or educate them. So,
yeah. Like for me, I just think like I said, I could be doing my former career. I could switch back to that any day. And so if I'm going to do this, I want to do it in a way that feels fulfilling. And to me, that's working mostly with clients who are more aligned with my style of photography, and there's not resistance. Yeah. And I think that for the few more like tour type workshops that I've taught, I've just I sometimes feel like there's resistance to, like, when I tell a group, like, it's clear outside, we're going to go out and we're going to find things to photograph, and there's sometimes pushback of, oh, that light is bad, I don't want to go out. Like, I want to work with people who are like, I'm open to that, and I want to spend my time just maybe seeing the world a little bit differently. Again, there's no judgment. It's just different.
Right.
What excites us in terms of connecting with nature and being outside is different.
Yeah. And I mean, you like to photograph by yourself, even when you go, right, with your husband. You're kind of like, yeah, you go do your own thing, I'm going to go
Yeah.
do my thing, right? And I would assume that when you're doing a workshop or trying to teach people, you want people to go explore and do their own thing. You don't want them like, hey, here's the photo, take this, right? Look what I'm taking. You
Yeah.
want people to go and kind of explore the world around them and do that, because that's probably the way you like to do it, right? You would rather encourage people to just go and not do what the masses are doing, right? And
Yeah. Like, the first workshop that I ever went on, the instructor lined us up
right,
and expected us to all have the exact same composition,
right,
because that was his composition. And so, uh, again, if that's what excites you, that's fine. But that's not what excites me. So I'm actually teaching a workshop in a month, and where the orientation is tonight. And I have a slide that's all about, like, we'll walk through the landscape together, and we'll talk through what I'm seeing and what I might photograph. But once it becomes time for us all to be working on our photography, we're not going to line up. So
yeah,
just setting the expectation of this workshop is about, what are you connecting with in the landscape, and then how can you photograph that? So if you're connecting with the bigger scenes, then I'll help you with the composition for that grand landscape that includes more the classic, like, foreground, midground, sky, and we'll work together on that. And then for other people, they might be interested more in some of the plants and the smaller scenes, and so if that's what you're connecting with, I'll help you with that. But we're not all going to be doing the same thing. And for
yeah,
me, like, leading workshop, I feel like it's really important to set that expectation, because it is kind of different than what a lot of people do, like, where the group is doing one thing, and there's less time for individual exploration. I kind of flip that around, of, I want people to have the time where they feel like they don't have to do what the group is doing. I'll help
yeah.
them. I want them to walk away with a photo from that outing that they like, but we're probably not going to be all doing the same thing.
Well, and I would think it helps them explore their own, come up with their own voice too, right? A little bit more. Um, Not just doing what you've seen this photo, you're going to this location, you want to recreate that exact photo.
Mm-hmm.
That's not really coming up with your own voice in photography necessarily. So, um, yeah,
And some people aren't really interested in that side of
yeah,
things. Like, they're much more interested in going to impressive places and coming back with photos that they feel are visually exciting. And they aren't necessarily interested in the turning inward and thinking about their motivations and thinking about what they're connecting with, and individually with the landscape. And I think there's room for all of us to be
yeah,
doing what we're interested in. And we
sure,
all have different interests. And like, going back to your original question, though, that, like, thinking through, like, how do you make this a sustainable career? How do I make photography education and teaching a sustainable career? And for me, it's spending my time doing the things that I can see myself doing for the next 10 years. And if I was leading a really busy schedule of workshops where it was all very location oriented, uh, and specific scene and composition oriented, I think I would burn out incredibly
yeah.
fast.
So when you're out capturing images and you're focused on subject, whatever your subject is, are you thinking about how you're going to process that image, meaning you have the vision for the image when you're shooting it, or does it kind of become a discovery process in post processing?
I
Um,
think I do it both ways.
yeah.
Like, I
Okay.
don't think there's an answer to that for me at all. Uh, I know somebody who, she talks about how when she's photographing a subject, the title comes to mind, and she totally visualizes what the result is going to be. And I've never really been like that. So with my black and white work, there's much more visualization involved, where I see a scene and I think, will these tones work? Is there enough contrast? Like I could see presenting this with a lot more drama and intensity. So in that type of circumstance, I'll sometimes see an opportunity in the field that looks pretty kind of maybe blah even, but I know
Mhm.
that in processing I can bring some life back to it. So in some of those cases I might have some vision for how I'm going to present it, but generally my processing for my color work is very straightforward, where I might be cooling things off, and as I mentioned before, I might be working on uh, a little bit of contrast, a little bit of color, and maybe emphasizing the light, but beyond that I'm not doing that much. So it, for me on the color side, I don't really need to be thinking about how I'm processing it. I think one thing that I do a lot of though is the technical piece, of where I think a lot about the technical side of photography when I'm in the field, so that I know that I have the files that I need when I get back home. And
Yeah.
a lot of people are very familiar with exposure blending, where you're taking multiple exposures to blend for exposure. But like focus stacking, with
Yeah.
focus stacking being built into cameras now, that's something that more and more I'm teaching in workshops, because it's such an important technique to expand creative opportunities, but the technical side in the field is a lot more complicated. Like you really, for smaller scenes, you have to really think through like what's closest to you, what's furthest away, and how do you get all those layers in between. With landscapes, it's a little bit more simple, because you can tell what's close, you can tell what's far. But
Right.
with smaller scenes, there can be, getting the right number of files can be a lot more complicated. So that's an example of where I'm thinking about, I want this scene that's pretty distant, like from what's closest to me to what's furthest away. I want it to look compressed. So I'm using a really long telephoto lens, and then I know I'm going to focus stack that when I get back at home. So that's thinking about the technical side, not
Right.
necessarily the creative side, which I think is more what you were asking about, but would still
Yeah.
be something I'd think about in the field.
Yeah. And I tend to find that like if I walk away from the image, like I'll come home and I'll start, fours, threes, whatever, making, my choices. And I'll do some processing. But then I kind of find that I'll get bored of processing that environment, and then I go away from it, and I'll come back like I don't know, a couple months later, and I'll start looking at stuff, and it's like your perspective is totally different at that point. Like
hmm
something that you thought might not have been that great, you're now kind of going back to it and looking at it. Do you do that a lot?
Yeah, well, since I have a backlog that's like, I was looking at Yosemite photos from 10 years ago that I never processed last
Oh my
night.
God. Yeah.
So, but I think that that's an interesting example, because looking back on those photos, I really loved them at the time. And now I I'm just a different person now.
Right.
So it's actually been kind of hard to go back in my backlog and try to process those photos, because a different person took them.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. I had a bunch of film that I had and slides, and I spent time over COVID scanning a lot of it, and some of it I kind of rediscovered,
mhm.
some of these images that I had, but there was a number of them that are like, "Ooh, these are not good."
Yeah, I think that's a great way to explain it, is that it's both rediscovery and realizing that some just don't stand the test of time.
Yeah,
So there's a benefit to keeping things around, because you some early hints of a new direction might have been bubbling up, but you didn't quite see it then. So then
yeah,
revisiting it, you see that thread more clearly. But then also, um, I was just attracted to totally different kinds of light 10 years
yeah,
ago, and now it just doesn't. It's dramatic and beautiful, but it just doesn't resonate as much with the portfolio that I'm working on developing right
yeah,
now.
and how your voice came
hmm
over those
Yeah,
years, right? To
exactly.
of style.
I think
Um,
there's a so 10 years is ridiculous. The fact that I have photos that I haven't looked at that I took 10 years ago. And
You've got
then,
stuff even from like 2 years ago, right? That you haven't
oh yeah,
processed yet,
like
huh?
Alaska, I haven't really, I processed enough Alaska photos for an article and then
Mhm.
I just left everything else. But I think there's a, a happy medium where maybe a couple months or 6 months or even a year. But then once you start getting, like in my case, I have so much stuff lingering in my backlog but that's because I love the being out in nature part. So I focus my time and energy on that. I am getting better. I've processed a lot more recent photos than I have in the past. And I do think a huge part of it is self-confidence. Like I feel
Hmm.
better about my work now. I
Yeah.
feel like I'm able to bring that photo to through processing to look at like I want it to look. So there's that confidence. I think it also took a long time for me to be comfortable with the quieter side of my work, that it's valid and that an authentic expression of who I am. And if I want to be true to myself as a photographer, I need to be comfortable in sharing it. So I've gotten much more comfortable with feeling like my approach to photography is a valid one, that I have the skills, the processing skills. I think I've worked a lot on curation and sequencing so that when I present the work, that it amplifies like each individual image is amplified by the way that I'm presenting them. So I think it's just been a matter of feeling more comfortable in, in terms of who I am as a photographer and building some very specific skills.
And I would
So,
assume, like you said, curating the work, you know, when you're out in the field, and you come back and you're looking at it that night or whatever. Um, oh, these are really good ones that I definitely want to touch,
mhm.
and all the rest of them kind of drift away to be discovered at a much later time. And there might be some really cool things in there, but right now these are the ones I want to focus on, right? That you just know inherently because you've been doing it all so long, and you have a voice and what you want
Mhm.
to convey with the session or the location or the time that you're doing it right at that moment, right?
I have found recently that I'm questioning my initial instincts a little bit more,
Hmm.
because I have found with some recent trips that in the moment, some of those photos aren't standing the test of 2 months, even.
Interesting. Yeah.
So I think a friend of mine, Alex Noriega, he has a
Hmm.
very particular approach to curating his work, where he develops very small collections of photos that are very tightly edited. I've seen some of what he considers like B-sides, and they're what most people would consider like their best work. So
Wow.
I think being around somebody like Alex, and I think other people that take his approach to much tighter curation, like Brent Clark is another friend of ours, and he's another person who does pretty tightly curated collections. And I think I'm slowly drifting in that direction of where, and we're redoing our website, which is giving me a tangible incentive and a practical
Yeah.
incentive to not want to put a lot of photos up there. Of I think I don't want to be too critical. Like I want to still include photos that I like, that I know that they just might not be that great, but I really like them.
Hmm.
And but also be a little tougher on myself. And I think I've gotten more comfortable with that approach. I think I think I want to go maybe 10 or 15% in that direction of just curating a little bit more tightly and not depending so much on my initial instinct, because like I said, I'm questioning it a little bit more than I used to,
Yeah.
of that feeling in the field might not necessarily translate to the best photo.
Yeah. That's the hardest thing for me, is narrowing down this collection to a smaller amount of
Hmm.
really, really nicer photos. Because
It's tempting
I
to
get
take,
attached to some of them. You know what I
yes,
mean? Mentally. So
exactly. It's like there's some appeal in being a film photographer some days, of where
yes.
you come back from a trip with 50 photos like that. They would be
Yeah.
interesting to experience that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we're so spoiled now. We can hundreds of
Hmm.
photos. You just keep shooting film. Cards are cheap
Hmm.
in relative terms. So,
Yes.
um, You mentioned Alex. Are there some, who are some of your mentors or photographers that you look up to, or that over time, uh, really, really looked at their work and thought, wow, this is really amazing. I really want to meet this person, or I want to, study what they're doing,
Mm-hmm.
or whatnot.
Well, I'll first answer the mentor question. I've had a really hard time finding any mentoring relationships in this
Hmm.
field. And
Wow.
so I don't have, well, individual people have been helpful to me for sure. I don't think I've never had what I would consider a mentoring relationship, which is so different than my career in the nonprofit world, where there was a mentor around every corner. And I think part of it is the geographic dispersion of people in the nature photography field. You just don't see people like
Hmm.
that FaceTime as often. And thus it makes it harder to develop those kinds of relationships. And then I think professional photographers are just so busy with so many demands on their time that it's, for whatever reason, I've never developed what I would consider a mentoring relationship. And I think it's made it hard. Like that,
Hmm.
um, I have individual people that I can go to if I have questions about specific things, but that long term, in depth kind of coaching relationship I've definitely never had in this field. And it has felt like a hole because I
Do you
had
think
that experience in the nonprofit world.
Do you think it's also the industry was more male dominated and there wasn't enough female, you know, uh, people to aspire,
Yeah,
or
well,
mentors that you were looking up to in that, who were female, maybe? Or do you think that doesn't matter as much?
I think that's probably part of it for sure. I think
Hmm.
the gender dynamic in landscape photography is always weird because a lot of the connections among my peers are made like around the campfire on trips that women aren't invited to. So
Hmm.
now that's changing a little bit because there are so many more women. So I'm able to develop relationships with like a circle of women who I really trust. But those are much more peer oriented relationships. I don't think I've had any trouble developing strong peer relationships. It's more that person that's maybe a decade ahead of me and has done and their career is at a different level than mine is. I've never had that in-depth supportive relationship with that kind of
Hmm.
person. And I do think gender probably has played a role because um, for lots of reasons. I'll just leave it there. I
Yeah.
think in terms of the peer support though, that's definitely changing for women. That there are just a lot more of us and we're all at a similar level in our career. So building those relationships has been really helpful. In terms of the question about who I look up to, I'd rather not talk about contemporaries because I think it's too easy to leave people out.
Yeah.
But I can talk more to some of my earlier influences who I think were really important in forming who I am as a photographer today. So, Bill Neal, who we've already talked
Hmm.
about, he would be an example. So, somebody that I saw early on doing work with smaller scenes and
Yeah.
intimate landscapes. So, definitely Bill. Charles Kramer is one of my all-time favorite photographers,
Hmm.
and his ability to translate chaotic woodland and forest scenes into beautiful works of art with like elevating grace and elegance in his work. So he's somebody that I look to as being especially influential when I was first getting started. I think he was probably the first person that I came across that was doing intimate landscapes that made me think, oh, there's a this stuff that I've kind of been doing on my own, there's a way to do it that's much more refined and artistic. So I think I was able to take some of those initial instincts that I had on my own and then see them represented in somebody like Charles
Hmm.
Kramer's work. And then the third person that I would mention would be Guy Tao. And his
Hmm.
work was both, I think, the combination of his writing and his photography at the time when I was in a like I was going through a divorce and trying to figure out what I wanted my life to look like. And some of his writing prompted me to say, like, I don't want to live in a city anymore. I want to envision myself living in a different area. I want to be in a relationship with a person who I'm more aligned with. And now I am. I'm going to take the risk to try to get there. I maybe want to live a slightly unconventional life. And his writing encouraged me to think that that was possible. So I
Hmm.
really value that side of his writing, of like the benefits of living a creative life and taking risks to get there. And then his photography also, his use of light, his use of color, his composition skills, like all of those things I learned a tremendous amount from. So I think those are probably the three people that I would consider most influential in terms of where I was getting started. And then I have all sorts of contemporary influences and peers who I greatly respect and admire. And I don't so much consider them inspirations. I consider nature my main inspiration, but I would say that those are people that have been influential or that I admire in some way, and that those things have impacted my photography and how I think about this world.
I'll have to check out Guy's work. Not as familiar with
Interesting.
his stuff.
Yeah.
So
So I think some people look at his work now and it looks similar to a lot of other photographers' work because so many people have copied him. So I think the important thing going in to looking at Guy's work is knowing that he was the person who he was the first person to do landscape photography in this way and photograph some of these places. So he has an ethics statement, I think, on his website that explains some of that because he is so widely copied. Relentlessly copied, I would say. But so when you go to look at his work for the first time or revisit it, I think just knowing that he was a trailblazer in the field of photography. So even if some of it looks a little bit more commonplace now, it's just because people are doing
and are used to seeing
in his
it.
footsteps.
Yeah. So, we were talking about going through the images, you come back and whatnot. What's your process for narrowing down, your images into heroes? Are you doing like numbering in Lightroom and that type of thing as well? Number of stars?
I can go through my process real fast. And I think the hero word, I don't know that I'd consider any of my photos heroes because I really think of my work as it's meant to be in a collection. I have very few photos that stand alone, which is one of the reasons I find it really hard to post on a service like Instagram, because like a collection of 6 of my plant photos, like they're meant to be seen together. They're not meant to just be like, oh, this
it's a
one
story,
is the best.
Right? It's a story
Exactly. But back to your question about the process. So the first thing that I do is I split my files in. So I do all the focus stacking and all of that so that I have every photo that I did focus stack files for, I have the focus stack finished so that I can fully assess the composition. And once I'm finished with that technical side of things, I split my files into small folders. So I want a folder of no more than like 50 or 60 files so that I can then go through a small collection of work and have it feel really manageable and kind of isolated. So I'll go through the process of splitting everything into folders, locations, all of that. And then I go through those folders starring things as 4s or 5s. So the 5s are things that I think I for sure want to process. And then the 4s are what I would consider kind of on the fence. And then once I've gone through every folder for a trip, then I have a bigger picture of everything. And at that point, then I can see everything that I've considered a 4 or 5 and get a sense of how does this fit together as a collection? Where is there duplication? Where are there similar scenes that feel like they're different enough, like different light, different colors, different composition, but they're similar? Do they both belong in the collection, or should I choose one or the other? Are there scenes that like the light, the colors might be a little off? So I curate very carefully for color. I want blues to flow into each other in a visually attractive way. So let's say I have one photo that had a very cyan toned blue and the rest were more purple blues. Either I question, like, could I process it so that it would fit in better, or could it be in a different section of the collection where the colors would look good? And then sometimes I'll get rid of photos just because the colors look off, because I'm going for a very specific visual look and the colors just don't make sense, or there's a composition that's a little bit more aggressive and the rest are a little bit more graceful. So at that point, I'm looking to put together a more cohesive collection. And once I've narrowed it down to, say, for a 1-week trip, that might be 30 to 40 photos. For a longer trip, it might be 100 to 150. But I see it as a full collection. Then I start working on processing. So I want to
Wow.
see the collection before I start working on individual files because I present my work in portfolios. So
It's interesting. That's cool. Yeah, I'm trying to. I have Bill Neal's portfolio development book over here, and I'm like a third of the way through of that whole idea of building portfolios, like you're saying,
Mhm.
instead of like naming them here, it's Iceland or it's
Yeah.
Uh, so I don't know. I'll see how long it takes me to get through all that. Um, so I was really interested. At Nampa, you were saying that you're traveling a lot, and you guys bought an Airstream, right?
Hmm.
That's what you're traveling.
Yeah.
And how has that changed your photographic life, having this this Airstream, this home away from home?
Well, we've had it now for 10 years, which is pretty
Oh
crazy.
wow, okay,
Yeah. So we bought it in 2014. So we've had it almost 15
yeah,
years now.
yeah,
Or no, I'm
10
adding
years
up
now,
incorrectly.
11 years.
11 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've had it almost 11 years. And it's dramatically changed the way we photograph. So you call your podcast like Chasing the Light. I used to think of my former approach to nature photography as 100% chasing the light, where it was like, is the weather more interesting on the other side of the mountains? Okay, we're going to go there. We're going to drive like crazy, go there. I'm kind of not feeling Zion National Park anymore. Let's drive to the Grand Canyon. Or, oh, it looks like there could be some interesting weather in wherever. Let's drive overnight to get there. And it was very fast moving, very weather oriented. I never stayed places long enough to get past the iconic compositions. I'm not
Mhm.
saying that like the chase the light approach is always just icons, but that's how I was tending toward it. Is I was never getting past the icons because I was moving too fast. And the Airstream, our first trip, we went to Zion National Park, and I think we stayed for 2 weeks. And it was the first time I had ever stayed anywhere for more than a couple of
Mhm.
days. So
Interesting.
for the first time ever, it was like, oh, we aren't going to just move the next day. I'm going to have to figure out how to make this work. And at first I resisted a little bit, but then by the end of that trip, it was just it was so nice to not feel the pressure to move on and to really feel like I was immersing myself in a place. And I feel like that is obvious through my photography now is
Yeah.
I do go visit the iconic scenes and I love photographing them in a lot of cases, but then I have time to go beyond the iconic scenes, or I have a chance to go back a couple of different times to revisit those places, like the Mesquite Dunes in Death Valley. I would consider that a very iconic place. And some people would call it over photographed and
Mhm.
kind of like there's nothing new to be done there. But when you can visit it 5 or 6 times over the course of a 6-week trip in the park, then you start seeing it. You start noticing things that you hadn't noticed before, or you get to a different section of the dunes that you hadn't had time to hike to, or you notice that there are really fascinating plants growing in the little places where water collects. So I've just been able to connect more deeply that idea of the second impressions that I mentioned earlier. When you can only go to a place for 3 or 4 days, you just go to the trails that are the top trails. Well, now I'm able to go to like the last rated trail on All Trails and realize that I actually really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And so just I think I'm forming my own impression of a place in a way that I wasn't able to when I was moving more quickly.
Hmm. Yeah. You don't have that rush of
Yeah,
I can only afford a hotel here for this long or whatever.
exactly. Yeah.
Right. So yeah, you,
And I
you
hate
definitely become
hotels
more
now.
intimate. Yeah, I bet.
I love like the Nampa conference when I hadn't stayed in a hotel for a while and I missed my trailer. I like
Yeah.
having my little kitchen. I like having my own bed. I like having all my stuff.
And there were a
So
lot of people that had their trailers or vans or
mhm,
whatever, and they weren't staying in the hotel, right? They just
yeah.
came in to eat, or even sometimes they weren't even eating. They just went back to their van and ate because
If
they
it
were more
hadn't been
comfortable
so
there.
hot,
Yeah.
we had planned to bring our trailer with us, but then it was going to be in the hundreds in Phoenix, which we were passing through on their way to see family. And I would have
Yeah.
rather had my trailer.
I bet. I bet. You are the co-founder of the Nature First Photography Alliance. What is the Nature First Photography Alliance, and how did that get started?
Well, so now it's kind of evolved into mostly a set of principles. I think initially the group that formed it had a bigger vision, like that we might be able to work with public land agencies and publications and do a little bit more in terms of advocacy. But I think that proved to be unrealistic without a different approach. So I think now Nature First is mostly just an embodiment of principles that photographers can follow to be more responsible. So from the time that I started, so I mentioned I published a photography guide on photographing Iceland.
Mm-hmm.
And when I published that guide, it was the landscape of landscape photography was just so different. Most of the people who were photographing came to nature first through hiking and backpacking. So they learned like outdoor ethics, like leave no trace, and basics of land stewardship, and just had more of an orientation towards protecting the place and realizing that you have to be respectful or
Yeah.
you're going to do damage. Now a lot of people come to nature through things like Instagram and TikTok and travel blogs, and they don't necessarily receive the same education about the sensitivity of a place.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's in most cases, I don't think there's any ill will or carelessness. I think it's just a lack of education. So the point of Nature First is essentially to have 7 very clear principles about the importance of being a responsible photographer when you're out in nature. So that means things like don't trample wildflowers, don't like in Death Valley,
Yeah,
some
because I'm going to
places
be
are
there photographing them right after you. So make sure.
well, it's like if everybody tramples the wildflowers,
Yeah.
then there will be no wildflowers
Yeah.
because if you compact the ground, then the seeds can't germinate. And these fields of flowers that we love, they just won't grow. So in each different ecosystem, there are particular things that we need to be aware of about our impact as photographers. I think another really important thing is when we're communicating about our work, we make it really clear about the circumstances of how we photographed things. So I just shared some wildlife photography, and in the description that I have at the top of the webpage, it's like was I was using a long lens, I was at a distance, I was maybe on a bus, so that people know that like it's important that you keep your distance from wild animals and that our presence can impact them. So I feel like it's important to communicate those types of things when I'm sharing my work. So essentially it's 7 principles about how you can be a thoughtful and responsible photographer and think about your impact and then communicate about it to other people that might be viewing your photos.
That's great. That's a great cause. I actually went to it and checked it out, and there's also some classes, right, and stuff like that on there. And
I'm not formally affiliated with the organization anymore, so I'm not sure what they're doing. But I think the main way that anybody can get involved is just adopting the principles in your own practices and then communicating about them. So whether that's listing the Nature First logo and the principles on your website, pretty much any publication I do, I try to talk a little bit about one of the principles or like how
just
I would
being a
try.
responsible steward of the land as a photographer. And
yes,
there are a lot more people out there doing that, doing the photography, and getting more of them to understand to leave no trace and to not have an impact on these locations. And just even posting like where you were photographing, all of a sudden there's hundreds of people, right, that want to go to that location. So
like I never post anything more specific than like a national park or a region anymore. I don't post specific trails. I don't post. Like in our ebooks, we still do sell an ebook on Death Valley National Park. We only include the places that are most well known and well traveled already. So I know all sorts of crazy places in the park, but I would never share those online anymore.
Yeah. What thoughts on where the future of photography is headed? Is we've got the creator economy, we've got AI coming in. Have you noticed an impact at all on photography in terms of where people can make money? All of those issues. What do you see as the future?
We could talk about this for hours, Ian.
I know.
I could try to touch on each of those things, at least briefly. So the cuts with the federal government,
Yeah.
that has already started impacting professional photographers, because some people who do commercial use permits have been laid off. So I
Mm.
know some colleagues who are scrambling to figure out how to get permits because the person that they've been working with for years is no longer at that federal agency. So that, I think, federal government land management issues, I think could be a potentially huge issue for our
Yeah.
field. Reducing the number of public lands, making permits harder to get, all of those issues I think are very concerning. I personally am trying to communicate about that with people on my mailing list and other places, like trying to advocate for public lands right now and speaking out about those types of things, just and encouraging other people to do the same. In terms of the creator economy, I think that there are two opposing forces, that there are more people trying to do it, so it's more competitive than it's ever been. But then I also feel like if you do things just ever so slightly differently than everybody else, that you can still find an audience. Uh, I I feel like I'm still getting good traction with everything I'm doing, and that so I like the fact that there are fewer gatekeepers than there used to be, because I've been able to build a business just like without having to work with book publishers or magazine publishers or other people that like bestow approval on me. I've just been able to find my own audience. So I really love that. But then it's also very competitive, and I think fewer gatekeepers society wide, like we're seeing all sorts of problems with that, like just in
Yeah.
terms of news consumption and other things. Both pros and cons there. And
Yeah.
then I think with AI, I listened to a podcast the other day about a report called AI 2027 that is essentially foreseeing a future in which super intelligence is achieved, and it's like a science fiction horror story.
Right.
So
I know.
like feeling very bleak about that, and kind of hoping it just doesn't come to be, and feeling powerless. And also for myself, I have not found a way to integrate any AI stuff into my workflow other than like removing something that might be challenging to clone out in Photoshop. Like I've
Right.
experimented,
Or sharpening
yeah,
tools, right? Or
noise
something like that.
reduction,
Yeah.
sharpening, those types of
Yeah.
technical things are great.
Yeah.
Uh, I've tried using Claude for kind of like a writing partner, and feel like all it wanted to do was kind of shave off the edges and make me go down one kind of very narrow middle ground. And I didn't like that at all. So I'm feeling particularly bleak about AI. I think probably because I just
Mhm.
listened to that podcast.
Yeah.
Like, how about you? I'm interested to
Well,
hear what your thoughts are.
I'm in the visual effects design world, and I actually just went to a thing called AI on the Lot here in Culver City, and you know, just like everything else, right? It has its pluses and minuses. The great things, like you were saying, are it's the removal of the gatekeepers, people who can tell stories, write stories. They have the ability to create visuals now for their stories, and they don't need $100 million in approval from Paramount or Warner Brothers or something. They could do it, and they could do it for a lot less money. Um, the To me, the downside of it is we're not going to prevent people from scraping all the data. It's been done. It's being done. But copyright is a huge area that you know Congress is still trying to figure out what the internet is. So,
Yeah,
you know,
email.
yeah. So I don't have faith that things are going to be legislated properly for a long time, and by that point, water will be under the bridge. But I really do hope that some of these legal challenges will enforce copyright a little bit more. Um, I don't want my images scraped and used to create stuff without my permission. I want, I spent time, you spent time doing stuff, and people should get compensated for that, and asked if they can be used, not just assumed that everything that's posted is theirs for the taking.
Hmm.
So, I have mixed feelings. On one hand, like you said, it gets rid of some of the gatekeepers and allows people to tell stories that aren't getting out there. But I also want people to be compensated and whatnot. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a really terribly mixed bag right now.
Yeah, like the consent and compensation piece that's a center of some of these lawsuits that are percolating. Like it just seems like so obvious that it's such a misinterpretation of fair use.
Yeah, I
But
mean, it'll
it
be
also
interesting to see what happens with Disney. Disney's just
mhm.
now suing, ChatGPT. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out.
But like you like so much water is under the bridge. And like my husband is a high level senior software engineer for a startup, and he uses AI constantly in his
Hmm.
work, and it in some ways it helps him, but he also sees how bad it is, like that. So I think being around him, he kind of tempers my fatalistic view, because since he uses it, I think he just has a much more realistic view of what's happening in like the next 5 to 10 years. I think longer term though, for creative people, like I'm really hoping that there's still a big enough segment of the population that values human creativity, and that there will thus be space, like how film photography is still a
Yeah.
niche, and people, there are some really prominent film photographers who are very successful on YouTube as an example, like that there'll still be a place, a big enough market for human creativity as AI
I think
evolves.
people are gonna seek out uh, original creators because they will get sick of the fact that all
Mm-hmm.
of this is generated. They're going to want authenticity. Can you prove that you actually went and shot this image? And
Mm-hmm.
is it really yours and your thinking and your thoughts? And the more, I think that's going to become very valuable, in my
Mm-hmm.
opinion. I mean, that's just where, because I see it. Everything else is going to be, we're losing track of what's true, right? What's truth. And so the more people are going to be searching for truth and real and real creation. So that's my hope and
I
thought.
sure hope so too. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're getting to the end here, but I do have one last question,
Okay.
and that is, what's next for you? What are you doing?
What's next? What's next immediately is I'm in my house, and I'm so happy that I'm in my house and I'm not packing another bag. Um, that makes me very happy right now. Longer term, I would really, so I'd like to get this new website finished that we're working on. I would like to get back into doing more writing and YouTube videos on a more regular basis. So, one of my issues professionally is momentum and consistency. And I feel like I would really like to really focus on being more disciplined in that area. And then I would really like to start working on some book projects. I would like I would like to be able to hold my work in my hands, and just, I'm still not sure if publishing with somebody or self-publishing is the right answer, leaning towards self-publishing. Uh, but that's, I think, just generally where I'm seeing my future is, I think, just doing the things I really enjoy doing, but doing them better, and kind of focusing more narrowly, and just trying to do two or three things really well instead of spreading myself thin, which is what I've been doing over the last couple of years. So that's a
Yeah.
very, very vague answer. Staying home, going to New Zealand, photographing fall colors this year here in Colorado, just kind of simple, like
Yeah.
kind of simplifying and focusing.
Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I really enjoyed talking to you today. I think your work is spectacular. You know, I asked Justin and Jerry, who they thought were up and coming photographers. And they said, well, it's not so much up and coming, but we really like Sarah. They mentioned
Mm-hmm.
you as somebody who they really loved your work. And I was really excited to meet you at NANPA. And I'm very happy to have you on the podcast. So thank you very much.
Yeah, well, it was wonderful to meet you, and thank you for passing on those kind words from Justin and Jerry. And I wish you the best of luck with this endeavor. I hope
Thank you.
that it whatever your goals are, I hope you accomplish them. And I really appreciate you having me on one of your early episodes. So thank you. It's been so
Thank you
nice to
very
connect
much.
with you.